Okay, so visual diagnosis. Trying to work out what's happening with somebody just by looking at them. So not speaking to them, just by looking at someone, trying to work out where they're at. This is something we do every day, naturally. We're always looking at each other, trying to work out what's happening with each other, working out what different people's emotional states are, yeah? So a lot of this is intuitive. A lot of it is to do with posture and movement, yeah? So if you're walking down the street and someone's walking towards you and they're kind of going like this, you're already diagnosing what's happening with them. You're thinking maybe they've drunk too much, yeah? You know, if someone's really tense and aggressive and like this, you know, you're already diagnosing. You've got an idea about what's happening with that person, what their emotional state is, or if someone's very calm and just standing very peaceful, you have an idea about what's happening with them, yeah? So, diagnosing by looking is something we do all the time, but within Chinese medicine, we use diagnosis by looking to actually work out what's happening inside a person in terms of their health, yeah? So, look at me. Have a look at me carefully, yeah?
You look fine.
Okay, so I'll stand sideways. Bald patch, yeah. Got my ears. Okay. Bit dry. Very good. Very good. Okay, so I'm about average height, maybe slightly taller, but you can see I've got a little bit of a stoop here. I lean forwards a bit. I'm not fat, but I carry a little bit of weight around my waist. My head is quite small in relation to my body. My hair's grey and I've got a bald patch on top of my head. My face is normally a bit red in comparison to the rest of me. My ears are small. My earlobes don't hang down separate from my ear, they connect direct to my head. My skin's a bit dry, and my voice is, well, my voice, we can't talk about that because we're talking about visual diagnosis. Voice is another thing, so that's a completely different lecture, yeah? The other thing is, I move around quite a lot. I'm a bit kind of restless, I make a lot of movements, yeah? So diagnosing in traditional Chinese medicine is based around 4 basic pillars. One is asking. Obviously, if somebody comes in and they want treatment, you're going to ask them, what's wrong with you? Why have you come to me? And they're going to tell you what their problem is, yeah? Touching or palpating, touching a person's body, feeling what's going on with them, either feeling what's happening to the internal organs, touching their arms if there's pain, that kind of thing. Smelling. Smelling was traditionally very important for diagnosing within Chinese medicine. Not so important now, obviously, because we all wear so many perfumes and colognes and we wash so much that tends to mask our individual smells. But looking is the other really important way of gathering information about someone. Yeah? So a student at CNM would look at me and hopefully they would say something like, I'm nearly a fire archetype, I have problems with heat, maybe with my heart, I have a weak kidney energy, I've got a weak spleen, and I'm what would be called blood deficient. So a student on the acupuncture course would be able to do all that diagnosis just by looking at me, yeah? Without asking any questions. And then if they wanted more information, they'd ask me to poke out my tongue. I don't know, have any of you had acupuncture here? Yeah. So you've had your pulse taken and you've had to put your tongue out, yeah? Tongue diagnosis is one of the very profound ways of seeing what's happening inside somebody. Tongue is the only part of the inside of the body you can see, yeah? Certainly when I was a boy, whenever I went to the doctor would always say, poke out your tongue, and they would look at it, but it just doesn't happen anymore, yeah? So, here's my tongue. It's slightly red. It's a bit redder at the tip and slightly redder at the sides. It's swollen, it's quite big. Yeah, it has what's called, it's got a little bit of scalloping. Can you see kind of at the edges of the tongue? It's so swollen it pushes against the inside of my teeth. There's a slight crack in the middle, not a really deep one, but a slight crack and some fine cracks coming across the surface. And it's got a bit of a coat towards the back, a kind of a dirty yellowish coat. Yeah? So that same CNM student should be able to look at my tongue and refine their diagnosis and say, yeah, this person possibly has a congenital heart problem, possibly with some heat in the heart. They've got spleen qi deficiency, stomach yin deficiency, kidney jing deficiency, and damp heat in the lower abdomen, probably the large intestine. Yeah? So just by looking, they're making a kind of diagnosis about what's happening inside my body. So there are all these stories told about mythical Chinese doctors, very, very famous Chinese doctors. They would sit at the end of a long corridor. And when you went to see them, you would open the door, you would walk down the corridor, and by the time you got to them, their diagnosis was complete. Yeah? So what's happening here is the idea that you look at the person as a whole. You would see the person coming into the corridor, you would see what their general shape is, what their general form is, you would see what their movement is like. As they get closer, you would start to see what's going on with their skin, what's going on with their hair, that kind of thing. And then as they actually get to your table, you can look into their eyes and see what their spirit's like. Yeah? I can't actually do that. But it does happen sometimes. Where I treat, I have a window that overlooks when my clients come in. And sometimes I can see people coming down the path. I can see how they move. I can see what their general colour's like. By the time I open my door and I see them face on for the first time, sometimes I can absolutely go, yes, this is liver blood deficiency, or this is liver yang rising. I'll know what the diagnosis in terms of Chinese medicine is. I won't know particularly what their symptoms are in terms of Western medicine, but often I can spot straight away what the underlying energetic imbalance of the person is. Yeah? So I've talked about all these things like spleen qi deficiency and kidney jing deficiency, and obviously these aren't Western medical diagnostic terms. Traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM, organises signs and symptoms and pathologies in a different manner. Yeah? Traditional Chinese medicine is at least 2,000 years old. The main book that it's based upon is the Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine. And what's amazing is that really that book is still the main teaching text for acupuncture and for Chinese medicine today. Which is pretty amazing, really. If you think of medicine in the West, medicine's gone through lots of different theoretical frameworks that have been thrown away. We're now in the kind of biomedical, drug-based framework, whereas Chinese medicine, really, a Chinese medicine practitioner and acupuncturist now is using really the same kind of concepts that were being used 2,000 years ago. Traditional Chinese medicine developed in an agrarian society. So, I mean, basically people were living in close contact with nature. And the kind of language that developed within Chinese medicine is very much the kind of terminology you would use to describe nature. So we often talk about people being damp, or people having fire, or having wind. I don't mean farting, but I mean kind of like tremoring, yeah? Scientists often complain that acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine is unscientific, and they say it's because it's not based upon hard evidence, it's not based upon hard observation. And they couldn't be more wrong, because Chinese medicine and acupuncture are based on centuries of observation, yeah? Chinese medicine is based around looking really very, very carefully at what is happening and having an understanding about how that impacts on people's health. So there are two basic concepts. In order to talk to you about diagnosing using Chinese medicine, I'm going to have to give you a really quick lesson on the basics of Chinese medicine. So by the end of this hour, you'll all be Chinese medicine practitioners, yeah? So 2 main underlying concepts are going to be yin-yang and the 5 elements, yeah? Have you come across yin and yang? Mm-hmm. Yeah? So you've all seen this kind of symbol, haven't you? Even if it's only been on someone's t-shirt or on a surfboard or kind of something like that, yeah? And it stands for 2 opposing qualities that need to be balanced for things to exist harmoniously, yeah? So the idea is that yang is kind of hot, energetic, moving, it's insubstantial, whereas yin is cooling, nutritive and quite solid, yeah? If you think about your thoughts are completely yang, aren't they? You can't take your thoughts out and put them on a table. They're a form of energetic activity. Yeah, but you can cut your organs out and you can put them on the table. They're much more yin. So we're always looking at the balance of yin and yang within humans. Another easy way of describing this is kind of hardware, software. Yeah? So yin is the hardware and yang would be software. It's what makes everything work. The other main concept in Chinese medicine is the idea of the 5 elements, fire, earth, metal, water and wood. Now, this doesn't mean that when you practice acupuncture you actually believe that people are made out of fire, earth, metal, water and wood, because they're not. But they're descriptors of phenomena in the body. They describe organ systems, they describe emotions, and they also describe kind of physical archetypes. So what I thought we would do is we would start by looking at some of the main physical archetypes. So if you were in that corridor walking towards the Chinese practitioner, they would look at your physique and start to diagnose you. So, fire archetype. A fire archetype would be someone who carries a little bit of weight around their waist. They normally have a smaller head in relation to their torso. Sometimes it can be slightly pointed. Fire men tend to develop a bald patch early. The idea is that the fire inside them is burning away the hair on top of the head. They are very sincere, they tend to be very sincere. Communication is crucial to them. They want to relate to other people, they want to share. If you think of what fire is like, if you think of the terms of fire is very much about being around a campfire, about sharing, about emotions, about sexuality, about warmth. Fire is great. Fire, you need fire for everything. However, fire can be quite dangerous. Fire can be uncontrollable. It can run away. Yeah, it can cause these terrible problems. So fire people can be prone to excess. Yeah. And they often have issues relating to their heart, which is very much dictated by the fire element, or to excess heat. And I fit more or less into this category. Yeah? So, we're talking about archetypes here. Most people, the idea is that everybody has all of the elements within them. You all have fire, earth, metal, water and wood. And they should be nicely balanced. They should all control each other. They should all flow into each other. If any of them are out of balance, if any of them are too pronounced or too weak, then you will start to develop either some kind of physical problem or possibly some kind of emotional state which isn't helpful. Yeah? So, some examples possibly of people who would fit into the fire stereotype would be Silvio Berlusconi, that insatiable appetite. You know, he's very charismatic, but my God, he's living life to the full, isn't he? And Sarah Ferguson and Paul Gascoigne. You know, everyone remembers Paul Gascoigne weeping when he did he miss a goal or score a goal or something? You know,
He'd go mad.
What?
He would go mad.
He would go mad. Yeah, absolutely. But you know, smallish head, slightly rounded physique. So metal archetypes. Metal archetypes tend to be much taller. They tend to have a very flat chest, both male and female. So the females tend to have kind of smaller breasts. They tend to have quite large heads, and they're quite flat. All their features are arranged on the front of their head. Do you know Tom and Jerry, where always at some point there'll be an iron, yeah? And Tom will get the iron, bang, in his face, and when it comes down, all of his features will be flat on his face, yeah? That's what metal people are like. All their features are flat on the front of their face, yeah? So, my wife always says they look like spades. If you think of what a spade is like, it's got straight, and then it's got that big flat thing on the top, yeah? So that's what metal archetypes tend to look like. So we're normally a mixture of all different elements, but for someone where the metal is very pronounced, they will look like that. The idea is that the chi is actually moving in such a way that it expresses itself very, very strongly. So metal types can be very rigid. If you think about what metal is like, metal is very shiny, it's very strong, it's very structured. So metal people can be very strong, very structured. They can also be very rigid. Yeah? When they are balanced, when they have enough fire, actually metal has this amazing quality. With metal, you can melt it down and you can recast it. Yeah? So if your metal element is good, chances are you can have several careers. A kind of person who could, work in a bank for a couple of years, then have an idea for an invention and become an inventor for a bit. Then they decide, no, I want to go ballooning across the Amazon, and then they do that, and then they come back, and then they have another career. Yeah, that would be an example of someone with very good metal. They're able to recast themselves time and time again. Metal types often have issues around respect or with grief. They have this idea of perfection, that there should be this kind of shining perfection that metal has. And the pathology they have often relates to the skins, to their skin, or to their lungs, or to their large intestine. Do you know this person? You probably don't. This is Cecil Parkinson. He was a very famous politician in Margaret Thatcher's cabinet. And he fell from grace because he made one mistake. His one mistake is he made love to his secretary. But unfortunately, he did it twice a day for 10 years. Yeah? So... Other examples would be someone like Lauren Bacall, or Peter Mandelson would be a more obvious example of a modern metal type. Quite slender body, largish head, able to recast himself in lots of roles. He's a real comeback king, isn't he? He's had so many different roles. Every time he's knocked out of the game, he comes back. Actually, it's been really difficult finding photographs of the whole length of people. It would have been really nice to show you more kind of what people's physique is like, but actually trying to find photos of whole bodies is very difficult. Wood archetypes. Okay, metal and wood archetypes are often mistaken. They're quite similar. A kind of metal archetype would be a kind of English aristocrat. Yeah, very tall, very thin, lots of hair, a bit distant. Wood archetypes, they're also tall and they're elegant, but they tend to be very, very sinewy. They need to be dynamic, they need to expand. In fact, spring is the time of wood. If you think about what's happening now, if you look out onto your garden, if you have one, you can see how you've gone from the time of winter, where everything has been very quiet and been very buried. We're now in a phase where green fingers are pushing up through the earth, everything's starting to come back. Yeah? I have oak trees down one side of my garden, and at the moment they're still barren, but there's little buds on there. And within a couple of weeks they will have forced out literally thousands and thousands of leaves. And if you think of the energy that is required to do that, that's absolutely amazing. That's all come from one tiny acorn, hasn't it? So wood energy is very dynamic. It needs to expand. It wants to reach fulfillment and accept the glory of the sun onto it, yeah? Which is great. However, unfortunately, modern life isn't always like that. We can't always just do what we want when we want. So wood people, when they're constrained, if they hit blockages, they tend to get very frustrated, yeah? And this can lead to lots of different problems. They might experience severe migraines, they might have anger issues, they could have painful periods, there could be lots of different things, but it could be from constraint of the wood element. Yeah? So wood and metal are very different. We talked about metal being able to be reshaped time and time again. Wood can only be shaped once. If you have a tree, if you have a piece of wood and you carve it into something, that can be fantastic. But you can't then put everything back and recarve it like something else. Yeah? So wood people tend to be people who they will do one thing and they will do that forever. And if they're expected to change, that's quite difficult. The other thing about wood types is they need to stay fluid, they need to stay supple, they need to be lubricated, yeah? Because if you think of what a tree is like, a willow tree, yeah? Being able to move in the breeze. If a tree dries out, what happens? It snaps, it can't cope, yeah? Earth archetypes, they're rounder physically, they may have issues with nurturing or eating or overeating. They can have weak boundaries sometimes. Do you know this person? You probably, yeah? She's Claire Rayner. She was a very famous agony aunt. And if you ever heard her speak, you would know she was incredibly supportive and incredibly nurturing and incredibly giving. But also incredibly cloying and incredibly, you could feel this emotion welling up. It was like, oh my God. So there was a good side and a bad side to it. Yeah? None of these elements are good or bad. If they're in balance, if you can express all of the elements and you express them well, then you're a very balanced person. But when one element is out of balance or is more visible, that's when people become very, very pronounced archetypes. Yeah? So earth types can be very supportive, they can be the salt of the earth, or they can be very, very needy and clingy. And they're often going to have issues based around digestive problems or weight. Another example will probably be Oprah, who, you know, balloons and shrinks, that kind of thing. Water archetypes. Water archetypes are the hardest to spot. So if you think of water, if you've got a jug of water, you can pour it into a cup, and it's that shape. You pour it into a bowl, it's that shape. You pour it onto the floor, it just runs away. Yeah? People who have a lot of water in their emotional makeup, in their internal landscape, are very difficult to pin down. They're quite they're insubstantial, they change. So, you know, maybe sometimes you meet someone and you think you know them, but it doesn't matter how long you talk to them, it's like there's something you can't put your finger on about them. That's because the water element in them is very noticeable. Yeah? Water is incredibly powerful, it's at the root of everything. If you think of that seed that we were talking about growing in the oak tree, that's only going to happen if there's water there. Yeah? So water brings life, it's very powerful in that sense, but it also can be very frightening. If you think of the ocean, if you think of the depths of the ocean and how frightening the sea can be with huge waves rolling. Water people often have issues with fear or with motivation, and they often have, in terms of physical problems, they will often have water-based issues such as edema, urinary problems, that kind of thing. Yeah? So people rarely conform to one archetype. We have all these different elements in us, but in some people, an individual element stands out much more than others. And when we see that in someone, it gives a very, very clear it gives us a very clear notion about what's happening to them in terms of their constitution. Yeah? What they've been dealt with in life. So this is the first part of kind of visual diagnosis. It's what you see when you see the whole person. How are we doing? Is this making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not in Chinese medicine, no. So visual diagnosis can be applied to any part of the body. Have you come across the idea of microsystems? Do you know what a microsystem is? Okay, microsystems is the idea that any part of the body is a reflection of the whole. Yeah? So you can diagnose. Did you just have a talk on iridology?
No.
No, you didn't. Oh, okay. Were you supposed to? Oh, tomorrow. Okay. Well, the idea there is that by looking at the eye, you can diagnose what's happening with the whole person. There's the idea that by looking at the hands, you can diagnose what's happening with the whole person. Something like reflexology, when you look at the feet, yeah, or you're touching the feet, you have a picture of the whole person there. I once treated someone. She'd been to China and she'd had treatment there with a Chinese doctor, and she'd had the translator write down what her diagnosis was on a slip of paper, and she had this folded up, and she wanted me to treat her. So I did my half hour's worth of asking questions and talking and blah 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 blah, and worked out what my diagnosis was. And she said, what's your diagnosis? So I told her. And she opened up her piece of paper, and pretty much exactly the same diagnosis. The Chinese doctor had looked at her thumbnail. He'd not asked any other questions. He just looked at her thumbnail and then told the translator what her condition was, which I really can't do. Yeah, but it's amazing that some people have that skill to be able to look at a tiny part of the body and have an understanding of what's happening to the whole person.
Wow.
Yeah. Something that's obvious that you can see in people are colours. Yeah? As that person is getting closer towards you down this corridor, you've seen their general shape, you're seeing how they're moving, you're seeing what their general form is like. You can start to see colours on them. So you can use your common sense for kind of some of this. If you see red on a certain part of someone's face or someone's body, what do you think that might indicate?
Heat.
It's heat. Heat. There's going to be some kind of heat, probably. Yeah? If you saw blue, like a bluish hue, what do you think that might? Cold. Cold, typically. White.
Water.
Who's saying blood? Blood. White can be cold again, but it's typically blood deficiency. Yeah, so you see people with a very pale complexion. They're anemic, or in terms of Chinese medicine, we would say that their blood is weak. There's also this really fantastic Chinese term, qing, which is kind of blue-green, and that signifies stagnation. And I think, if you know that when the heart pumps blood, the oxygenated blood as it's going out is red. When it gives up the oxygen, it comes back, it's slightly more bluish. And when you see that through skin, it often looks like a kind of a greeny colour. If you look at older people, you will often, you can start to see it on me, a slight green hue. And this implies that things aren't moving quite as quickly as they ought to be, that there's some kind of stagnation, things are getting stuck. Yeah? So when somebody comes in to me and they've got something wrong with them, they've got a particular pain, they've got a bad back or a bad foot, you go to the doctor and say you've got a bad back, they might not even look at it. They'll just, write you a prescription and give it to you. I always want to have a look. I want to see what it's like. I want to touch it. I want to feel it. Is it red? Is it pale? Has it got this kind of qing colour to it? What's going on with them? So Chinese medicine is very practical. It's a very simple way of working. If something's hot, we tend to use points or techniques that will take the heat away. If something's cold, we're probably going to use acupuncture points or techniques that are going to warm that area up. So there's moxibustion. Have you come across moxibustion before? Yeah? You've had it? Have you? Yes? So moxibustion is a herb mugwort, Artemisia vulgaris, that smoulders at a very high temperature. So within Chinese medicine, this is pressed into rolls, almost like cigars, which you can then light and you can hold over acupuncture points. Yeah, and the heat penetrates and warms individual acupuncture points. It's very stinky though, very, very smelling. And if there's stagnation, we tend to use points that are going to break up the stagnation and get things moving. So some visual diagnosis is intuitive. We were talking about colour, weren't we? We were saying that that's quite obvious. Some of it is based around centuries of observation. Certainly looking at people's faces, you can often tell what's happening inside them. And that's probably one of the reasons why makeup is so popular, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to hide, you're trying to prevent people knowing what's really happening inside you. What you're doing is you're trying to present that veneer of everything being perfectly okay.
So now with things like Botox and stuff, would it be harder for you to diagnose?
Well, possibly, but you know, when somebody's face isn't moving because they've had so much Botox, that's already telling you something about the way that they see themselves, or the way they interact with the world. So once again, if you look at the 5 elements there are kind of typical faces, typical makeups in terms of the 5 elements. I mentioned about fire people tend to have a rounded head, pointed chin, you know, possibly redder skin like I've got. Earth people tend to have jowly, thick-set faces. The stomach channel, which relates to earth, the stomach channel starts below the eye, it comes down, it swoops around the jawline, comes in front of the ear and goes up to the corner of the head. And there's a branch that comes down and goes down to the digestive system and down to the legs. Yeah, but this part of the face is absolutely dictated by the stomach channel. So just by looking at what's going on here, you can often have an idea about what's happening with somebody's digestive system. We talked about metal people being like spades, or being like Jerry when he's had that iron hit him. Wood people tend to have long, narrower, thinner faces, very well-defined, thin noses, narrow cheeks, high and wide forehead. Water faces, once again, it's hard. I can't really tell you what water face is like. It's kind of like it's not really anything. It's kind of the person, you look at a picture of them, you look away and you think, I've no idea what that person looked like. There's nothing really distinctive about water people. Yeah, that's not good or bad. It's just a description of where they are. There's the idea that different parts of the face, different areas of the face relate to specific organs. So around the mouth is very much to do with the spleen and the stomach and the intestines, as you might guess, because it's very much to do with digestion. Below the eyes is supposed to be about the kidneys, so we often look to see if there's kind of dark bags under the eyes. Those often indicate some kind of underlying kidney pathology. Tip of the nose, very much to do with the heart. We're always looking what the shape is like. Is it a normal colour? Is it much redder? Running down by the side of the nose, this gives us an idea about what's happening with the person's lungs, as you might imagine. Above the eyes, not sure I absolutely agree with this diagram actually. It mentions bladder above the eyes, which is unusual. A single crack in between the eyes normally indicates there's some kind of underlying stomach weakness. If there's 2 cracks, that's much more to do with the wood element, which is more to do with the liver and gallbladder. But the whole of the brow itself tends once again to be stomach. I mentioned the stomach channel coming up onto the corner of the head. It does then actually move towards the centre and meet with another channel there. So really the stomach channel dictates the whole of the front of the head. So for example, headaches. If someone gets headaches that are always on the front of their head, that will be very much due to some kind of stomach imbalance. So you'd have to be working out what that was, which would be very different from someone who's got headaches from, you know, the top of their head or the occiput or from the temples, that kind of thing. Yeah? And the jawline, that's the stomach. We talked about that, didn't we? So, tongue diagnosis. So this person's actually got right up to you now. You've seen them, you've seen how they're walking, you've seen what their general shape is, they've got towards you, you've seen their face, you've looked at colours on their face and on their skin. You've been able to see what their individual features are, if there's any colour in any particular places. Then they sit down. Then you can look at their tongue. So just as I talked about different parts of the body, like the sole of the foot or the hand or the eye, being a picture of the whole body, there's the idea that the tongue is also a picture of the whole body and can tell you what's happening. And so as you poke your tongue out, if you were to kind of point it upwards, if you were to turn that picture upside down, it will kind of show you the organs in descending order. So the tip of the tongue is very much to do with what's going on in this part of the body. Yeah? It's very much to do with what's going on with the heart and the lungs. The central area is much more to do with the stomach and the digestive system, the stomach and spleen. The sides is to do with the liver and the gallbladder, and then the bit right towards the back is to do with what's happening in the lower part of the abdomen. So that's more to do with the kidneys, with the bladder and with the intestines. Yeah? So when we diagnose people's tongues, what we're doing is we're looking at the shape. You know, is it long and thin and pointy? Is it very broad? The size and the shape, is it swollen? Is it particularly thin? What the colour is, can you see any colour on it? A normal tongue should be a nice kind of fresh pink colour. Some tongues are very pale, some tongues are very red. I've even seen one blue tongue, only once in 12 years, but I have seen genuinely a blue tongue, so that person was very, very ill. I've seen a white tongue as well. The person was a complete maniac, absolutely mad. Just by looking at her tongue, you could tell. Severe psychiatric condition. Yeah? So when we take somebody's pulse, that's like a snapshot of that exact instant. You know, if you take someone's pulse and you ask them to think about something horrible, their pulse will change absolutely immediately, because that's what their energetic state is at that second. When you look at someone's tongue, that's kind of what's happening to them generally at the moment. That's more about their underlying constitution and also what's happening in this phase of their life. So absolutely, if you're fasting or if you're doing something very different, your tongue will change. People's pulses can change like that, but people's tongues, it's a slower change.
What is the coating on the tongue then? Is it a coating?
So the coating can tell us lots of different things. Depending upon where the coating is, the coating on the tongue should be a whitish colour, quite thin, and what we would call well rooted on the tongue. It should be sitting properly on the tongue. So sometimes if you look at the coating on people's tongues, it can be very thick. It can be kind of almost like yogurty, like a really thick fur. It can be white.
What's that then?
Or it can be... a coating which is very thick would imply some kind of dampness. So that would be somebody hanging... turbidity would be a better term. The idea that somebody's digestive system isn't processing things very well. They're actually holding on to lots of the crap out of the food. Yeah? So in terms of Western medicine, they might have a cholesterol problem, for example. But in terms of Chinese medicine, a thick coating would normally imply people aren't processing food very well. They're holding on to the kind of all the sticky, nasty, horrible stuff. If that coating's very white, there's the idea that there might be cold involved in that. But if it starts to get kind of yellowy, then there's probably heat there as well. And then depending upon what part of the tongue it's on, it can tell you where that turbidity is.
What about if there's no coating?
If there's no coating, that tells you that there is a problem with the digestive system, but it also can tell you that if there's too much heat in the body, it's almost like it can burn off the coating. So you have to look at the coating in relationship actually to the surface of the tongue. So sometimes when there's no coating, I'll show you some pictures in a moment. Sometimes when there's no coating on the tongue actually becomes what we call mirror tongue. So it's actually almost like this. It's almost shiny. It looks like somebody's put it onto a griddle and it's burnt off everything. It becomes like a shiny surface. And that tells you once again what's happening with the person's inside. Yeah? So we're looking at the general colour of the tongue, we're looking at the coating, we're looking at the cracks. Are there any cracks? And if so, where are they? Some people have a big crack in the middle, some people have cracks all over, some people have cracks at the side, crack at the front. And also we're going to be looking for movement. When people put out their tongue, is it nice and stationary? Does it wobble? Does it deviate to one side? All these things tell us what's happening inside. Yeah? So by looking at different tongues, you have a really good idea about what's happening to people. You can have a normal tongue that should be, unfortunately the colours on here aren't kind of very good, but you have a very pale tongue which is swollen with scalloping on the side will imply that the person, that they have qi deficiency, their energy isn't very strong. They could have all kinds of different symptoms, but in terms of Chinese medicine, we try to avoid looking at the symptoms and we look at the underlying imbalance. Yeah? If you can get the underlying imbalance corrected, then the symptoms will change. So you can have quite purplish tongues, very pale tongues, quite red tongues. Yeah? So, I know. One of the great things about Chinese medicine is we have to look at everyone's tongue. So they all tell us different things. So this one here, this tongue is quite large, it's quite swollen, it's got quite a deep central crack with a couple of cracks coming off to the side. This person has spleen qi deficiency. They've got stomach yin deficiency. There's this crack in the middle. Cracks, if you think of the earth, when the earth dries out, it kind of cracks, doesn't it? So if you see a tongue with lots of cracks in it, it implies that somewhere in the system things are drying out. They're not quite as moist and as nourished as they should be.
If you rectify it, can that crack go?
Yes. If you rectify these things, people's tongues can change. Absolutely. But much more slowly. As I said, the pulse is like a picture of what's happening at that instant, but the tongue, with time, with a week or 2 weeks or a much longer time, it will change. Yeah. So this other tongue's very interesting, isn't it? Look, it's quite reddish. It's got, I don't know if you can, because it isn't projecting very well, you can't really see. It's got quite a lot of red bumps towards the front. The coating is kind of on half of it, isn't it? Coating's over to one side, and it's got, it's almost like the coating has been burnt off in a certain area. Yeah? The fact that it's onto one side implies there's a problem with the gallbladder. There's obviously, and there's quite a thick coating at the back as well. There's going to be heat issues here. First tongue, much paler, swollen, scalloped. Once again, it's been pushing against the inside of the teeth. I don't know if you can tell. Can you see little red dots as well here? So there's going to be heat in the upper part of the body somewhere, possibly in the lungs, possibly in the heart. The tongue is quite pale generally and quite swollen. The person's spleen probably isn't working very well. They're going to be blood deficient. So in terms of their Chinese diagnosis, that's what you would say. In terms of their symptoms, it could be lots of things. They might have anxiety. They might have insomnia. They could have some kind of digestive issues. But once again, when you treat using acupuncture, you're trying to go behind the symptoms to find out what's happening actually on the inside of that person, because that's what you're trying to treat. I do personally give herbs, yes, but not all the time. Acupuncture is great for certain things. Herbs are great for certain things. So some people get acupuncture and herbs, some people get just herbs, some people get just acupuncture. The bulk of what I do is just acupuncture, but there are times when herbs speeds things up. Yeah? Most of my practice is based around infertility and IVF support. Yeah, so when women need herbs, that's what they get, but they don't always need herbs. And this other tongue, look at this other tongue, it's very red, isn't it? Very red, very, very cracked, no coating. So there's obviously a lot of heat here, everything's cracking open. I can't really see unfortunately we can't see much more of the tongue going towards the back, so it's quite hard to tell what's happening with the rest of the body, but there's definitely a lot of heat trapped in here and damage to fluids. I know, now we start to get some really skanky tongues. Okay? So look at this heart here, look at this tongue here, the big dip, the crack that reaches all the way to the tip, and then it's almost like a little dent in the front of the tongue. This implies there's some kind of heart pathology. Yeah? The tongue hasn't got any coating, but interestingly, it's got these cracks at the side. Can you see these cracks that are running laterally? Yeah? So, we've talked about the crack down the middle before being very much related to the stomach and spleen, but the side of the tongue is more related to the liver and the gallbladder. So possibly some liver yin or liver blood deficiency. That could be causing, once again, it could be causing anxiety, restless sleep, might be causing muscular cramps, it could be causing menstrual problems if it was a woman. The tongue above, it's really horrible, isn't it? That's okay. That's all right. It is. It's the kind of tongue that you hope people don't put out. You know, there's a thing called death tongue.
That's smoking.
And you really hope that people don't put it out because you've got bad news for them. No, smoking will make the coat dirtier colour, but it tends not to make it black. When the tongue is very black like this, there is an intense amount of heat somewhere in the body. It is scorching the tongue coating black. So this, once again, I think the colour on the tongue on the upper right isn't very good. It's got a kind of yellowy cast to the picture, but you can certainly see how tongue coatings can be completely different.
Does someone like that have quite severe symptoms?
Someone like that is probably very, very ill. They might have terminal cancer, something like that. It will be an indication of what we would call toxic heat locked in the body somewhere. Yeah? So, why don't we look at each other's tongues? So we're not actually going to do any diagnosing, but I just thought it would be quite interesting if you look at each other's tongues. Try and look at two or three different people's tongues, just to see how different they are. Yeah? So we're not diagnosing, we're not trying to work out what's going on with people, but just have a look at each other's tongues. Have a look at the shape of it. Have they got a big tongue? Have they got a little tongue? Can they only just poke it out a tiny bit, or do they thrust it out? Is it red? Is it pale? Well, no, that tells you something straight away. If someone kind of goes, that tells you they're very deficient. Yeah? If someone goes, then they've got an excess because they're pushing that tongue out. Yeah? Look at the colour. Is it very red? Is it pale? Is it a nice pink? You know, hopefully you're all going to put out your tongues. They're all going to be a nice pink. They're not going to have any cracks. They can have a little thin white coating. Have a look at each other and see what you find. Yeah, we'll just do it for a couple of minutes, just very quickly. Try and have a look at a couple of different tongues. Okay, so if we just come back to the front for a moment, you've all had a look at a couple of tongues?
Yeah.
And were they quite different?
They were.
Did you see, yeah? Yeah, you can see how everyone's tongue's different, although I must admit, loads of you seem to have very similar tongues, so there must be like a CNM student tongue, which everybody has, yeah? But it's a really profound way of looking into someone's body and seeing what's happening. Yeah? So just to kind of wrap up, looking at the outside of somebody is a really potent way of understanding what's happening on their insides. Chinese medicine, acupuncture, as a philosophy, is a complete way of looking at things because it's based around man's relationship to nature, how we fit in to the cosmos, seeing how the cosmos or nature is reflected within humans. It becomes it's a very profound subject. People who study Chinese medicine become Chinese medicine geeks. They absolutely love it. Because what happens is they start to see all these things that they've never realised before. They see them in themselves, they see them in other people, and it enables them to kind of understand what's happening on a much deeper level. Studying acupuncture will take the blinker off your eyes. You'll suddenly connect much more with things. Yeah? So, so that's it really. Thank you very much for having listened. Someone was asking me whether I practice here. I don't treat here, but I do. I supervise in the teaching clinic, and I'm going to be running the clinical observations module next year. So if you wanted to come and be treated, I could treat you here, but in front of a group of students who are watching. I'm based in Surrey, so it's probably quite hard for you to get to me. Okay? Any questions just before I wrap up? Yes?
The acupuncture course, is it with the herbal medicine or just...
It's a separate course completely.
So you have to do the other one together?
If you want to do herbal medicine, it's a completely different course. Yeah.
No, the Chinese...
Chinese herbal medicine.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I don't think they teach specifically Chinese medicine, Chinese medical herbalism here. You can do Western herbs and you can do acupuncture, but they're different courses, yeah.
Right, okay.
Any other questions? No? All right, well, thank you very much for having stayed until 5:30. It sounds like... Thanks. Sounds like it was a long day for you, and hopefully I'll see some of you on the acupuncture course shortly.